Hello, my name is Macy. I'm going to be talking about my study today. We are all evolutionary success stories that come from thousands and thousands of generations of successful matters that succeeded in selecting a mate, attracting a mate, having sex with a mate, and keeping a mate long enough to have a child, and then keeping that mate to see the child grow. You survive. More importantly, there are many, many, many failures in these tasks, and at any point, if your ancestors failed, you would not be here today. So the probability of you being here is very, very slim. Okay, so first I set up what I'm going to cover today, and that evolutionary psychology, particularly a study done by Dr. David Buss, sex differences in human mate preferences. Evolutionary hypothesis tested in 37 cultures. That is the first study to examine human mate preferences across cultures. Then I'll most closely examine the study itself by looking at the reason for the study, what Dr. David Buss was testing, the method he used, and the result of the lasting implications of the study. All right, so I'm going to give you guys an intro on mate preferences. Mate preferences show importance in at least 3 scientific ways. First, they can affect the current direction of sexual selection by influences that are favorable for mating. These favored characteristics show some heritability and as a result can be seen in later generations. Individuals lacking these characteristics tend to fail in supplying evolution in forward generations. Second, the current mate preferences of the result of prior selection preferences, which clues on a species' reproductive history can be found. Third, they can bring about selective pressures in specific ways. For example, in a minute I'll show you the video. Members of a female peacocks have particular standards, think feathers, so that the male peacock use tactics to reflect those preferences, think blossoming their feathers. And as a result, they are used to attract and retain female peacocks. Let me show you this for an example. And here we see the fluffing of the feathers to attract the female. Okay, so because of the consequences of preferential mating, the assumption can be made that eventually these preferences will evolve through sexual selection. Darwin suggested this and has been documented in various species, not including humans. Despite our success in being here today, little is actually known on what preferences got us here, and so Dr. David Buss set out just to study that. Okay, now let's look at the reasons for the study. Okay, reasons for the study. To do this, Dr. David Buss looked at sexual differences in human mate preferences in 37 cultures across the world. Because mate preference can provide important clues to human reproductive history, data from multiple cultures is standard for evolutionary based hypothesis. After all, studying one culture or one location does not represent all of the human species. Okay, what was tested? As I mentioned before, little is known about which characteristics are promising to human mate preferences. So Dr. David Buss relied on 5 predictors based on sexual evolutionary concepts, which is parental investment, sexual selection, human reproductive capacity, and sexual asymmetries in parental and parental. In short, these predictions set the stage for Dr. David Buss to test how each sex valued earning capacity, ambition, industriousness, youth, physical attractiveness, and chastity that derive from 5 predictors. So, for women, earning capacity and ambitious industriousness should be favored by women because there are more availability and willingness for resources given to her and her offspring, so food, shelter, protection, and everything they need, which has been verified in many non-human species. But for the men, Youth and physical attractiveness should be favored by the men because of their cues to women's reproductive capacity. Chastity, too, should also be favored by men because it increases the probability of paternity. So, the following study was designed to test the hypothesis in 37 different cultures. Now it's time to look at method. Because of these factors within these cultures, along with their location, sampling techniques varied and the questionnaires were consistent. Nevertheless, these techniques tended to increase the generality of consistency found in the results while leaving little room for bias in any sampling procedures. So, for the questionnaires that were used, they featured earning capacities, ambition, industriousness, youth, physical attractiveness, and chastity. For instance, on the first instrument, right here, the last part of the questionnaire wants subjects to rank all 18 characteristics from good finances, good health, good looks, and all those types of things. From a 3 to a 0, which 3 being the best, from 0 being unimportant. The other two parts required them to give them basic information and preferences in marriage. Dr. David Buss decided to use this questionnaire because it's being used in the US for more than 50 years. And the other questionnaire has 13 characteristics that too are featured to target the items that are tested on the hypothesis. Okay, let's look at the results. And so, what yielded was females valued the financial capacity of potential mates more than the males do. The ability to acquire resources or ambition industriousness also intend on the valued more by females than males across the country. Okay, also, it shows that males prefer physical attraction and relative youth in potential males more than females. Chastity is also important to them. And so, 3 of the 5 predictions, those involving mate preferences for earning capacity, 97% for earning capacity, 100% for youth, and 100% for physical attractiveness, were strongly confirmed across cultures. On the other hand, ambition, industriousness was confirmed in only 29 samples, and chastity was confirmed in 23 samples. So, despite 3 out of the 5 predictions having strong support, the implication of sex differences in mate preferences across the cultures is noteworthy. The study shows support that males and females are faced different cues and reproductive success in the past. Females preferring earning capacities and males preferring high reproduction capacity can be said to represent the adaptation for evolutionary problems in the past. This implies there are good advantages for doing so and serves as proof that mate preferences represent the evolutionary predictors. So, the findings have also had strong implication on Darwin's sexual selection and intersexual competition. Mate preferences mean sexes compete with each other, be it displaying reproductive capacities in females and more resources from males. So the study too serves as a basis for testing hypotheses about human intersexual competition on an international level. As you can imagine, there is a lot of limitations testing cross-culturally. This is where a new study seems to come in handy. The purpose of the study was to weigh gender and equality in their preference equality in hopes to show a core set of preferences in a larger skill set. Some studies in the past have tried to show this, but the equality has varied. However, some studies have verified with certainty that gave this study the means to find core sets. They found that with greater certainty by using the math of Dr. David Buss's data from all 37 cultures. All in all, researchers showed that Dr. David Buss's data can be weighed equally, which given them the means to define universal dimensions cross-culturally that can now represent larger sets of preferences. Russell also found that other characteristics we valued more, like kindliness, liveliness, and creativity, rather than the ones that he was testing. Another study has seen, as seen in the title, was used to replicate Buss's findings in a different method called mate dollars. And in mate dollars, asked, you were given 100 mate dollars and asked to give 5 characteristics they're worth. They too found that usual preferences and support other preferences being valued more, which can be said to support the universal dimensions found previously. Thank you and have a good day.